Look at what you're wearing right now: a t-shirt, a hoodie, jeans, maybe a suit. Maybe pajamas you've convinced yourself count as normal clothes because you're working from home. Now imagine taking every single piece of it off. Not for 5 minutes, not for a day, forever. No jackets, no shoes, no hats, no blankets, nothing between your body and the world. Sounds impossible, doesn't it? But for most of human history, that's exactly how our ancestors lived. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans walked across Africa completely exposed to the sun, the wind, insects, sharp rocks, and freezing nights. They hunted dangerous animals without boots. They crossed thorn-filled grasslands without pants. They slept under the stars without sleeping bags. Then, one day, something changed. Someone whose name we'll never know looked at the world differently. They didn't invent fire. They didn't invent language. They invented something so ordinary that you probably haven't questioned it in years: clothing. But here's the strange part. It wasn't simply because they were cold. In fact, the earliest evidence suggests humans may have started wearing clothes long before they reached the freezing landscapes most people associate with heavy animal skins. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If warmth wasn't the original reason, then why did humans invent clothing at all? The answer turns out to involve disappearing fur, deadly sunlight, parasites that accidentally recorded history, and one decision that helped transform a clever ape into the species that would eventually build cities, rockets, and smartphones. And it all begins with something humans no longer have: fur. If you compare yourself to almost any large mammal on Earth, something immediately feels off. Lions have thick coats, bears have dense fur, wolves survive brutal winters wrapped in natural insulation. Even our closest relatives, chimpanzees and gorillas, are covered from head to toe. Then there's us, a species of nearly hairless primates walking around with smooth skin, somehow convinced we're the normal ones. From an evolutionary perspective, that's incredibly strange, because fur is one of nature's greatest inventions. It keeps animals warm, it protects the skin, it blocks sunlight, it even helps defend against insects. So why would evolution ever get rid of something that useful? For a long time, scientists puzzled over that question. The answer seems to lie not in snow, but in heat. Around 2 million years ago, long before modern humans appeared, our ancestors began leaving dense forests and spending more time in open African grasslands. Life changed dramatically, food became harder to find. Animals migrated across enormous distances. If our ancestors wanted to survive, they couldn't simply wait. They had to chase. Not for minutes, sometimes for hours. This hunting strategy is known today as persistence hunting. Instead of being faster than their prey, early humans simply refused to stop. An antelope could sprint much faster than a human, but every sprint generated heat. Eventually, the animal overheated and collapsed from exhaustion. Humans didn't, because while almost every other mammal relied on panting to cool down, humans developed something extraordinary: sweat. Millions of tiny sweat glands turned our skin into one giant cooling system. As sweat evaporated, it carried heat away from the body. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't pretty, but it worked. In many situations, humans became better endurance runners than almost every predator on Earth. There was just one problem: sweating only works well if heat can escape your body. A thick coat of fur traps that heat. Over thousands of generations, less fur became an advantage. Not because being naked was fashionable, because staying cool meant staying alive. Slowly, generation after generation, humans became one of the least hairy mammals of their size anywhere on the planet. It was one of evolution's greatest trade-offs. We sacrificed protection to become incredible long-distance hunters, but every trade has a price, and humans were about to discover theirs. Without thick fur, our ancestors gained speed. They also became incredibly vulnerable. The African sun wasn't gentle. Day after day, powerful ultraviolet radiation beat down on exposed skin. Sharp grasses sliced bare legs. Branches scraped shoulders. Mosquitoes, ticks, and biting flies suddenly had direct access to skin. Even simple scratches could become dangerous infections in a world without medicine. Nature had taken away our protective coat. Now humans needed another one, not made from biology, made from intelligence. But what exactly did the first clothes look like? That's where things become frustrating, because clothing almost never survives. Animal hides rot, plant fibers decay, leather disappears. Unlike stone tools, clothes rarely last tens of thousands of years. It's like trying to reconstruct the history of paper airplanes. Most of the evidence vanished long ago, which means archaeologists had to solve this mystery in an entirely different way. And strangely enough, the breakthrough didn't come from ancient clothing. It came from one of humanity's oldest unwanted companions, a tiny parasite no bigger than a sesame seed, a creature so annoying that most people never imagined it could answer one of the biggest questions in human history. Lice? Yes. Lice may know more about the invention of clothing than any fossil ever discovered. Imagine trying to solve a murder, but the victim disappeared over 100,000 years ago. No fingerprints, no DNA, no body, no weapon, not even a photograph. That's essentially the challenge scientists faced when trying to answer one question: when did humans actually begin wearing clothes? At first, Archaeologists searched for the obvious: animal skins, ancient fabric, leather. But those materials almost never survive for tens of thousands of years. Rain destroys them. Bacteria consume them. Time erases them. Stone tools can survive for millions of years. Clothing usually disappears within centuries. For decades, the mystery seemed impossible, until researchers realized they had been looking in the wrong place because the oldest witness wasn't buried in the ground. It was still living on us. Tiny parasites have an unusual habit. They evolve alongside their hosts. If the host changes, they change too. Human beings carry two closely related species of lice, head lice and body lice. At first glance, they seem almost identical, but biologically they're very different. Head lice spend their entire lives in hair. Body lice almost never do. Instead, they live inside clothing. They hide in the folds of fabric. They lay eggs along stitched edges. They leave only to feed, which creates an obvious problem. How could body lice exist? Before clothing existed, they couldn't. At some point in history, population of ordinary head lice discovered an entirely new habitat: human clothing. Generation after generation, they adapted to this new environment until they became genetically different from their relatives living in human hair. That tiny evolutionary split became an accidental timestamp. Scientists compared the DNA of both species like detectives comparing two family trees. Then they calculated when they separated. The answer shocked everyone: somewhere around 170,000 years ago, give or take several thousand years, long before civilization, long before farming, long before cities, even before humans spread across much of the planet. One of history's biggest mysteries had been answered, not by kings, not by fossils, but by parasites. It's one of the strangest detective stories in science. A creature humans spend thousands of years trying to get rid of, ended up preserving the earliest evidence that we ever got dressed. But another mystery immediately appears. Around 170,000 years ago, most humans still lived in Africa. Africa certainly has mountains. It has cooler nights, but it isn't Siberia, it isn't the Arctic, it isn't covered in glaciers. So if clothing wasn't originally invented for freezing winters, then what was it actually for? Protection, not from snow, from everything else. Imagine walking barefoot through endless grasslands every day. Sharp stones, acacia thorns, blistering sunlight, clouds of insects. Every hunting trip meant cuts, scratches, burns, bites. A simple animal hide draped over the shoulders could reduce injuries dramatically, not because it looked impressive, because it worked. Sometimes evolution rewards the smartest invention, not the strongest body. But humans rarely stop at solving one problem. The moment something becomes useful, we almost immediately give it another purpose. Think about your phone. It began as a device for making calls. Now it's a camera, a wallet, a television,